Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to Iron Anchor Cycles. I know it's been a little while again since our last video, and I guess we got pretty busy leading up to Daytona, and then we're gone for a week for Daytona, and then just slammed coming back from it. Been doing, I don't know, you can't see most of what's in the shop, but just a whole lot of mini projects, service work, just slammed. The spring has come early here in New York. So on that note, I'm gonna do something a little different from what our normal videos are. Normally we've got a new product or we've got an install or something like that. Today, I'm doing maintenance, and I figured maybe people would be interested in just seeing something real basic. So what we're doing on this bike, I actually got the front done already, and now we're moving to the rear. I'm gonna change the tire. Now, obviously most of you don't have a tire machine at your house, and you probably don't need to know exactly how to get a tire on and off the rim, but thought it just might be interesting to see. But even in addition to that, we've also got brake pads to change and a couple of other little things, and maybe some of the little things that we do that a lot of people skip just to make things go quickly might be helpful in terms of maybe some maintenance you do on your own. So we're gonna do brake pads, we're gonna do a tire, and well, anything else we find while we're in there that needs to be addressed, we'll do that too. So if that interests you, stick around. I'm gonna get to getting this bike jacked up and get this wheel out of here, and we'll get rolling. All right, so axle out. Kind of went pretty quickly through all of that. Obviously you'll notice that I did not drop the muffler on this side or the other side and was able to get the axle out. That's helped in part by some little special items. I don't know if you saw, I don't know what I did with it. This 36mm socket, this is all one piece here, and it's designed to get around the pipe and be able to get that nut off. And then on the other side, depending on the style of muffler you've got, this end of the axle, if you kind of turn it, you can kind of work it around the things that are in the way. Sometimes you got to drop that muffler down. In this case, we didn't. The only thing you usually have to do, and I did do on the other side, was unbolt the saddlebag support bracket so I could pull up on it and sneak the axle out underneath. But other than that, axle comes right out without having to deal with the exhaust at all, which is pretty nice. So with the axle out, we can go start to get the wheel spacers and brackets out. Obviously pay attention to spacer positions, orientation, all that stuff. All right, so like I said, with the axle out, we can start to get some of these other pieces figured out. So the first thing I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna slip the belt off. Okay, now might be able to get the caliper bracket out at this height, might not. No, looks like we're gonna have to jack it up a little bit. You just kind of have to, depending on the bike and the various things it's got, you just kind of have to do things in the right order. And also, you know, just know which order you did it so you know kind of where the height of the bike had to be to get certain things on or off, stuff like that. So come up a little bit. I just heard one wheel spacer drop out. Here's the one on the other side. So this spacer that came out, this bike is not an ABS bike, so this spacer takes the place of the wheel speed sensor. If you've got a wheel speed sensor, that'll be there instead of this, and it'll kind of fall out and hang by its wire. Be careful of that. Take note of the routing of that sensor wire, so when you put this all back together, you route it the same way, and you don't put too much tension on it. So with those out of the way, got our caliper bracket, and our wheel is pretty much free. Now, from here, getting the wheel out from under the fender is actually the biggest pain of all of this. Sometimes taking one of the mufflers off can help. Sometimes just jacking the bike up, you'll have enough room. Really all depends. Obviously my lift has one of these dropout deals in it. These are good if you've got, like, you know, a couple extra pairs of hands, somebody to hold the wheel up, pull the thing out, you can get the wheel out. I'm usually by myself, so that's not really an option. So usually what I wind up doing is jacking it up and kind of wedging the wheel out. So I'm gonna try it that way and we'll see how it goes. right. See, that wasn't so bad. One thing you can do sometimes is pull the sprocket off before you pull the wheel out, although I kind of find that harder to do, usually, to get that on and off, so I usually do it this way. So this brings me to one of the upgrades we're gonna be doing now. These sprockets with the Cush drive, they just pull off. If I can get it. There we go. So that just pulls off, and you got the lugs on the back here that made up to the OE Cush drive, which is right here. So this is something we almost always change on every tire we do if it hasn't been done already. We'll upgrade it to the Super Cush from Alloy Art. See what that is right there. Not a lot of things that we sell are in this video because it's mostly maintenance, but we've got these. So if you're looking for one of these, you know, you're getting your tire done somewhere, you can order one of these from us and bring it to a shop. Most people don't have them. I'll put a link in the description below, but basically these are gonna do the same thing that polyurethane riser bushings are gonna do for you. They're gonna stiffen up that connection between the drivetrain and the rear wheel. You'll feel it on acceleration, you'll feel it on braking. You just get a more solid connection, but still get that vibration dampening that the Cush drive is gonna give you. So this is a great upgrade. They're inexpensive. They're less than 40 bucks. So we try to do these as often as we can. So I'm gonna put that aside for right now because we're gonna take this over to the tire machine and get this old tire off and get a new one put on. All right, sorry if it's a little dark over here. I've never actually shot with the camera in this corner of the shop before, so we're just learning as we go. So what I'm doing now is just taking the valve stem cover off so we can go to our first step, which is removing the valve stem core to let the air out of the tire. So I'm gonna do that. Okay, well that tire's up here. I usually like to take this opportunity to just do a little bit of cleaning, kind of get the bearings cleaned off. This is a little bit of, you know, just maintenance for the bike itself, but also gives you an opportunity to inspect and see if you notice anything that is out of whack or doesn't feel right. This bearing feels pretty good, so I don't see any issues there. I'm gonna get this tire, flip it over once. I'm just gonna look at the other bearing while I'm here. And these, I say the other bearing, these bagger Cush drive wheels actually have several bearings in them. It's a 4 bearing system. So you've got 1 bearing on each end of the wheel, and then that the Cush drive, the pulley itself has bearings in it as well. So when you buy a bearing kit for these, it's gonna come with all 4 of the bearings, and it's just something you gotta know. If you're changing bearings on these, you gotta do 4, not 2. All right. That one feels normal also. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is put this down on the ground. We'll break the bead and we'll start to get this tire off. All right, well, that was one of the more difficult tire removals I've had to do. Sometimes they're just a little stuck on there, and this one definitely was. So got that off, and we'll get to putting on the new one. All right, so we got our new tire ready to go on here. Obviously, first thing we gotta do is make sure that we're gonna put it on going the right way. Got a couple of things to look for. Number one, most obvious, hopefully you can see in the video, is we've got the alignment dot here, which is gonna align with the valve stem in the tire. Now, These dots for different manufacturers can mean different things, but in general, when you have one dot on a tire, sometimes there's two, but when you have one, you're gonna line it up with the valve stem, and more or less what it means is that this is the heavy side of the tire. So obviously the side of the valve stem is a hole drilled in the wheel, so the wheel's a little bit lighter there than it is anywhere else. And the tires are obviously close to as perfect as they can make them, but they're not perfect in terms of how they're balanced. So I guess they have some sort of process by which they, you know, check the weight on these things. I don't know about that. But in any event, this is the side that should counteract that missing weight in the wheel. So hopefully you'll need as little wheel weights as possible to get it balanced. Next thing we wanna look at is there's gonna be a rotation direction on the side of the tire. That is gonna be obviously the way you know which way to put the tire on the wheel. So in this case, we've got an arrow pointing this way, which means that if you think about that, this direction would be the way the wheel goes down the road. So back here, front there, which means that this side is gonna be the brake side and this side is gonna be the sprocket or belt side. So right now, we've got the rotor pointed up, which is good because this side of the tire is gonna be the side that goes up, and that's the side the dot is on. Sometimes if it's the other way around, you might have to either flip the wheel over so you can still see the dot, or if you can't because you've got like a Dyna or something like that that's got the big sprocket in the way, you might have to put the dot on the down side, and then you just have to, you know, make sure you get it aligned. Just a little, have to pay attention a little bit more, but no big deal. So in any event, we're gonna put this on with this side facing up. So I'm gonna start by putting it the other way, and we are going to goop up our sidewalls a little bit so that we can get this to get on nicely and seal properly. All right, so start by getting that red dot close to in position. It's gonna move around a bunch, but not a bad idea to start close. Then we're gonna slip this over here, give it a spin to drop the first side down. And now we get to do the fun part, which is getting the top side on. Now, I'll make a note, you know, the way that other tire came off, part of the reason it fights you so much, there can be reasons for that. Number one is, you know, you get an old tire that's really stiff, the sidewalls don't wanna move. That brings me to the next thing, which is these bikes that have very small sidewalls, just like car tires, make them harder to do because they're less flexible. And then lastly, you know, it can just be the way the tire is made, the compound of it. Some tires are easier to manipulate than others, depending on how hard they are. So obviously coming off on a tire that's not being reused, damaging the tire is not a big deal. On that one, the bead area did rip coming off a little bit. It was so stiff that I couldn't get the tire to go down into the drop center in the wheel to get it off easily. So, you know, you kind of have to do what you can do, and if you gotta force it, you force it. Obviously you don't wanna damage the wheel or the machine, which we of course didn't do. Why I mention it now is going on, you can't play that game. If it's not going, you just gotta keep trying until you get it to go the right way. If you try and force it, you can rip these things. They're really, really, really hard, but there's a lot of force that can be applied with this machine, so you just have to do it right. So hopefully we don't run into any nonsense like that, but just kind of calling it out so you kind of understand what we're doing here. So next thing I'm gonna do is drop the sidewall over the machine right here, get that down below there. And now, basically we gotta get this side up and keep this side down, and that's how we're gonna get it on. If you've got a nicer tire machine than I do that has, they call the third arm over here that can push down on this side, it makes it a lot easier. I don't have that, so just kind of have to do it all a little bit manually. So, well, I'll let you watch and we'll see how it goes. Perfect. That's about as easy as it gets, let me tell you. They don't all go on that easily. So now we are a couple inches off on the red dot here, so I'm just gonna spin this. Get as close as I can. There we go. All right, so we've got our dot lined up, and can pull the tire off the machine and get the beads seated. All right. So that little bouncing is just my own little thing. I found it helps to kind of get the tire centered or square in the wheel so it'll seat easier when you go to start doing this. So I'm just gonna throw some air in and hopefully this goes just as easily as the last part did. All right, so what you want to hear there, we didn't hear it, was pop, pop as the bead seats on each side. Doesn't mean it's not seated, but now we're gonna have to check. So I can keep putting air in this, but what I'm actually gonna do is just let the air out and make sure that bead stays seated so that we know it's really seated. All right. Yep. So if the bead wasn't seated, you'd see it sort of pull in and move back away. But here, obviously, even though there's no air in the tire, we've got no loss on the bead on either side. So we're good. We're gonna go ahead and fill it up. So what I typically do here, because these gauges aren't super accurate, is I typically overinflate it by a couple of pounds, and then once we get the tire back on the bike, I'll put the more accurate gauge on it, and we'll just bring the pressure down to the 40 PSI that it should be. So for that, we are all set on the tire machine here. Just got to move over to the balancer, get this wheel balanced. Hopefully it doesn't take too much weight. One step that actually we did not do on this wheel because we didn't need to was normally at some point while we're here, we would have taken the old wheel weights off. This wheel didn't have any. So either that means that it didn't need any and it was balanced with no weights on it, which does happen fairly commonly, or they fell off, which also happens all the time too. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this on the balancer and see where we're at, and we'll get some weights put on if needed, and we'll go from there. All right, so with the wheel on the machine, we've got to take some measurements to plug into the computer here. We got 60. Let's call it 6. All right, so that put in, we're gonna hit our start button. It's gonna spin, and we're gonna get an initial reading here on what we gotta do. All right, so that's 1.5 ounces is what we're looking for. We typically use gram weights here, so just swap that over, and that's telling us 45 grams. So I wanna see where on the wheel we gotta put those. And, okay. All right, so we're about maybe 60 degrees away from where the valve stem is. A lot of times you'll get weight right at the valve stem as required or right opposite. In this case, it's something else, which is, you know, just as common as anything else. But I'm gonna grab some weights, we're gonna stick them on, and then we'll spin it again and I'll show you what we got. All right, respinning now. Let's see what we got. 0, 0, 0. That's what we're looking for. So we've got our weights put on, wheels balanced, ready to head back over to the bike. All right, so we got our wheel ready to go back on the bike. I'm gonna install the Cush drive I mentioned, which is gonna pop in here. And then we're gonna put the sprocket back on. All right, so this, obviously, you know, you want to get it nice and on there and as seated as possible. I think I've got mine just a little bit of gap left. Obviously, what's going to happen is you just want to be able to fit all your wheel spacers in. When you get your axle in and you start tightening it, it's going to suck this thing right in. So you're just trying to make it as easy as possible to get your spacers and stuff back in there. So what I'm going to do now is try and wedge this thing back in the way it came out, and hopefully that goes as smoothly as it did the first time. No such luck. There we go. That wasn't so bad. Okay, try and get this kinda centered in here if we can. That looks decent. And I'm gonna start to lower this back down. And what I'm gonna do is, like I said when I was taking this out, kind of remember about the height that it was when you were doing the wheel spacers, the brake caliper mount, the belt. They're only gonna go in, you know, at certain times, not others. So if you can remember how they came out, it'd be a lot easier getting them back in. All right, this is as good as opportunity as any to clean the axle and the wheel spacers and all that other stuff that's got to go back in. So I'm gonna get these cleaned up, just some brake clean, wipe it all down, and then I'll come back and we'll get this all buttoned back up. All right, we got our spacers cleaned, axle clean. Axle's got anti-seize on it when the time comes. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm actually gonna go ahead and just stick the belt on now if I can. No, it's not, see, this is what I was talking about. Bike's still too high, belt doesn't wanna go on. I could probably force it, but we'll just put the belt on when we get it dropped down a little bit lower. So I'm gonna come down a little bit more. And what I'm trying to do is kind of get the swing arm so that it's kind of halfway around bosses for the bearings so that these will have something to kind of hang on to, and hopefully they don't just want to just keep popping out. All right, so there's one. And two. Cool. So that went well. So what I'm gonna do is keep dropping down now. Check the other side, make sure we didn't lose our alignment. Still looks good over there. And keep going. All right, that is pretty close. So now I'm gonna put the belt on and just try and get as straight and square as we can. Decent. All right. So from this point, I guess now I'll be able to see what I was talking about on the way out, where you kind of need to turn the axle to get this big piece to sort of fit through all this stuff. Obviously you can remove the pipe and all that if you need to, but like I mentioned before, we didn't have to on this one. So I'm gonna get this started in here. And so I disconnected the bracket here, like I mentioned, so that we can go up with it and over. And then turn so that we're facing this way, and it should clear the pipe. Okay, I think we're looking pretty good. Just turn that a little bit like that. Okay. And so we're a little high on the other side. One little click like that, see what that does. I think we might have it now. All right, so now I've got to turn this in again so that'll clear the shock. And now that we're past everything, we're going to come down into the position that we want it in for assembly. Axle's in. So now what I'm going to do is, before I put the nut on, I like to lift it up and get the wheel actually off the ground. This way we know everything is sitting and holding weight and squared by the axle. So I'm going to go over to the other side and we'll get the nut put back on and we'll continue with what we got to do over there. Okay, so back on this side, we've got the ear on this side to go back on. It's got a flat in it, so it only goes one way on the axle. And it is possible to install these wrong. I've seen it on some customer bikes that have come in. We've had to just fix them. If you don't put these on the right way, you wind up like sort of tightening it backwards, and this thing sort of jams in instead of like sliding up the way it's supposed to. Just pay attention to how it came off, and you'll know how to put it back on right. And if it doesn't seem like it's working, it's probably on wrong. Just keep that in mind. So put that on, and we'll just get the nut started here. I like to just put a little bit of tension on it. Now, the pro and con of the way these bagger axles work, the axle adjusters obviously are just built into the axle, so you turn that other side, turn the fixed side, and it'll move both of these, get the belt tension where it should be, and then tighten it down. What's nice about it is you get to do the belt adjustment every time the tire comes off, and it's really easy to do. It's just adjust it, set it, and you're done. The other bikes, the Dynas and Softails and Sportsters and FXRs and basically everything else that have manual adjusters in the back of the swing arm, what's nice about those is they tend not to come out of adjustment. These tend to either slip sometimes or they can get loose or whatever. You find a lot of loose belts on baggers, I think, because of this, but it's on those you have to be very cautious about evenly tightening them and checking the alignment, whereas on this it tends to be pretty easy to just sort of do it in one shot. So it's the pro and the con. I'm not sure if there's a clear, better, system than the other one. I think if you were, racing and performance oriented and all that, you'd be like, the hell with, the ease of doing it. I want it to be as strong and as reliable as possible. This is just easier to do. So that's the pro and the con there. So anyway, I'm gonna turn this side and hopefully you can see the other side moving and you can see that adjuster moving around. I'm not sure if I got the camera positioned correctly or not for that, but I got the belt on this side, and what I'm doing is trying to find just an initial tension that I like on it. And that feels like a pretty good starting point right there. I say starting point because you definitely want to check your belt tension with the weight sitting on the bike. We get it close this way, and then we do the final adjustment with the bike back down on its rear wheel. So in order to tighten this down, I'm gonna grab another specialty wrench here. That would be this guy. So this is another one that is designed to make it easy to get around the pipe. I find this one works really well to be the one on the left side to hold while you tighten on the right side. So we can slide this in right here. And here. And I'm gonna tighten. Okay, slide that out, slide that out. Now, I'm gonna lower the bike back down onto the wheel, and we'll see what our belt tension looks like. All right, I'm gonna bring you back on this side so you can see better what I'm doing. All right, so obviously our belt is here. You've got a little gauge here that you can measure your belt adjustment. Now, there is a tool, and I'll grab it and I'll show it to you, that if you're not familiar with doing this, you're definitely gonna wanna use one of these. This is the belt tensioner gauge, I guess you can call it. What this will do is this has a mark on it that will show you, let me find it here. You can see hopefully there, I don't know where it is, there's a little 10 right at that line. So what this will do is, I'm holding these wrenches in my hand, yeah, I can be able to see it, but you'll move this O-ring up and out of the way. And what'll happen is you're gonna push this up, you'll get it right till the O-ring hits that 10, and it'll hold the mark there so you know you got it. And that's gonna give you 10 pounds, foot-pounds of force going up. And you're gonna use this under the belt here, and you're gonna push on it until you get to 10 pounds, and you're gonna see how much deflection there was in the belt. You're gonna measure it by the little hash marks on here. Now, I say I don't normally use this because I've done this so many times. I know what it looks like and I know what it feels like, and I know what a properly adjusted belt is. If you don't, this is the way to do it. You'll measure here and you'll use this to make sure you're putting the right amount of force on the belt to deflect it. So right there, it's actually great. Where we initially set it, it's perfect. So I'm gonna leave that alone, torque the rear axle, and then we're gonna move on to the brakes. All right, so I've got a torque wrench, got this same socket on here, and I've got my little open wrench on the other side. Slide that in there, and we'll put this on here. And we're gonna get this torqued down. All right, so that's our wheel done. What I still have to do is just bolt this bracket back on that I disconnected. And then I'm gonna come back over here with the camera and we will deal with these brake pads and cleaning up this caliper. And definitely wanna stick around for that because there's definitely an important step here that most everybody skips, and it's pretty important. So I'll show you how to do that and we'll get this buttoned up. All right, so like I said, our next and I think last step is gonna be to get the new pads put in this caliper. Now, obviously, changing brake pads on a caliper is not anything special or a big deal, but there are a couple things that I think most people miss, and either because they don't know or just too lazy, in the case probably of shops, which is that taking the opportunity to clean the pistons on these calipers and get that dirt off of there goes a long way to getting a much better feel in the brake pedal or brake handle if it's the front. So what happens is you get this buildup of, brake dust and, road grime and all that other stuff that basically gets on the exposed surfaces of the caliper pistons, and it causes the pistons to not move freely, when you're pressing on the brake pedal or it's retracting, so either in and out. So what'll happen is you'll get long travel in your brake pedal or handle, and you will still, there's no air in the system or anything like that, but you just have a long way to go before it engages. And the reason for that is because the pistons are not moving the way that they're supposed to, not retracting all the way in when you let the brake go, or, pushing back out. So they're sort of sitting where they shouldn't be, and you have to get that extra distance on there. So basically, you clean these up, and you know, it's a pain because you gotta push the pistons out, you gotta clean them, then you gotta push them back in. And it's a mess and it kind of sucks, but we try to do it almost every time we do brake pads because it does make such a big difference in terms of the final result. So obviously, if you're doing this with a set of brake pads that are getting thrown out, all right, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna start cleaning this up. Now, I'm gonna run these pads in. I'm gonna not run them all the way. I still wanna be able to get in there with a screwdriver and pry them apart. But basically what I wanna do is just see, hopefully they're all moving. And one side appears to be moving a lot better than the other side. So what I'm gonna try and do here is hold back the one side and see if I can get that other side to move. Not quite. So this is exactly the problem we're trying to solve here. So there we go. So I was able to kind of hold the other three from moving with the pads, and now I got all four pistons further out than they've been. So what we're getting is a clean surface, and then all the dirty surfaces are exposed fully so we can clean them off. So with that done, I did have to let the pads all the way compress onto each other, which is not a big deal. We can still pry them apart with the screwdriver. It's just a little harder. I'm gonna start cleaning these off. So we just got brake clean here. I'm gonna hold this with a rag. I'm just gonna come in here and try and get as much of this junk off of here as we can. Give a little brush. Now, you're obviously not going to be able to get the brush all the way around these, but we're going to do as much as we can to make them as clean as we possibly can. Go a little bit more. All right. So there's our first round of cleaning, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with the screwdriver, and like I said, we're going to destroy the pads with what I'm about to do, but I'm going to come in and I'm going to pry these apart. Okay. Alrighty. Alright. So we got those mostly in. And from here, now we've got them mostly retracted, I'm going to go ahead and pull the pin out. And we're going to take the caliper, or sorry, we're going to take the pads out. And we'll get a better view of everything that's going on in there. One, there's two. Okay, now with that exposed, I'm actually gonna go ahead and do a little bit more cleaning, and we'll get these pads fully retracted. I just knocked my little tip off of here, but hopefully that's okay. Okay, come in with a brush, do a little. Okay, one more time. All right, so there's that. And I'm gonna dry this off. pistons just fully pressed back into the bores here. Once they're almost all the way in, you can kind of just do it by hand. So now we're good to go. Now, you can repeat this process a couple times. You can keep, pushing them in, push them out, clean them, keep going. What I'm gonna do now is I'm just going to I'm gonna put the new pads in, we're gonna put it on, and I'm gonna watch and make sure the pistons are all moving evenly and at the same time. And if they are, then we're good. If we see, kind of something hanging up or something like that, we can take the pads out, and we can repeat this again. We can always put the old pads back in so that we've got something to pry on and whatever. There's also, I have it around here somewhere, there's some cool little tools out there. We've got these are made by Hero from Red Rock Harley. He makes a whole bunch of like specialty 3D printed tools. These are little spacers that you can stick in here. And what they'll do is they'll hold the pistons so that they come almost all the way out, but not so far that they will, leak and come out of the seals. But you'll get them all the way out, and you can get them clean really nicely. You can pull these out, get in there with a brush. So we could do that too, but I'm gonna try it like this and see how he looks. So you put these pads in, and we'll get ready to go. I'm just gonna, before I put the pads in, I'm just gonna clean this pin off, and we're gonna put some anti-seize on it, and then we'll get everything assembled. So we'll take our pads, make sure we got these going in the right way. There's one. There's two. And put our pin through here. Okay. And now obviously we got plenty of space because we got our pistons retracted all the way. We can get this caliper slid back in place here. Okay. And we'll take our bolts, get those started. So now what I want to do is we're going to operate the pedal here, and it's going to start moving those pistons out. Just give it a couple of clicks. Now I'm just going to look from the back side here, and we've got both sides moving, which is good. Just keep going, and now we've got our pedal back firm. And I don't know if I'm in the shot here with my hand, I think so, but this is a very short amount of travel now, and it's immediately just really nice and firm. So you eliminate sort of a little bit of that initial sponginess and also that, like I said, extended travel with those dirty caliper pistons. That really has a big effect. It really, really does. I can't stress it enough. So we're really good now, and I want to look at it again and just make sure it's look nice and even, and it is absolutely perfect. So we're good to go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to tighten that pad pin. Snug that down. And we've got our little retaining clip here. I'm going to stick that back in. And we're good to go. So that pretty much wraps up the brake portion of this. So now all I've got to do is get everything, do a little wipe down. I didn't mention it before, but we also had this little E-clip that had to go back on the end of the axle. I stuck that back on. So we're all wrapped up here. I already, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I did the front. We actually did new rotors on the front as well. Did an even bigger service on the calipers. When we started doing the pistons and trying to clean them, there was one piston on each caliper that just would not move. Was really on one side. So it was just stuck and kind of seized in there, maybe gotten a little crooked, hard to say. It wasn't leaking, but the solution to that is remove the caliper from the bike, undo the brake line, stick these little guys in there, put an air chuck on it, and just give it a little bit of air, and it will blow those pistons and knock them into place and get them lined up and straight and square against here. Cleaned them off really well, got them to retract back in nicely, put the caliper back on, and obviously you got to bleed the brakes at that point. But because we're going to have to do the brake bleeding anyway, I decided to just remove the other caliper as well. Didn't know if it was one of those pistons was going to be stuck or not, but it said, hey, what the hell, might as well just do the full deal on that one as well. In this case, we didn't have to, undo the brake lines and get air in there, so we're good to go. The only other thing to be mindful of is, depending on how much fluid you have in your master cylinder, you're going to want to make sure, open that cap and maybe take some fluid out if you're going to be retracting those pistons in all the way. I had looked at this one and I didn't think we'd have a problem, so we left the cover on while we were doing that. But I'll just double check and make sure the fluid level looks correct. And we'll add or remove as needed. And of course, if it's dirty, we'll flush the brake fluid out. But front fluid looks pretty good, so I don't think there should be too much of an issue on that back one. But yeah, so that's basically it. I'm gonna get this bike put back together, get it down on the ground, and we'll take it for a ride. All right, so I lied. I said we were all done, but of course, like I said, I went and checked that front master cylinder to see what the fluid looks like, and it actually looks pretty old. It's pretty brown, not a whole lot of junk floating around in there, but fluid definitely looks old, and we've already got a bottle of brake fluid open from doing the front that we didn't finish, that we didn't use all of. So I'm just gonna take this opportunity, we're here, it's just gonna take a couple of minutes. We're gonna flush the brake lines on this rear brake as well. So I've got our vacuum bleeder here, I've got our brake fluid, and this is really easy. Because there's no air in the system, it's not, as bad as the whole process of bleeding. Really all we gotta do is just move that old fluid out and replace it with some new fluid. So it shouldn't take too long, and hopefully we should be back on the road in a moment here. So I'm just gonna get our bleeder bolt ready here. Okay, get that connected on there. And I'm gonna turn this on, and it might be a little bit loud, so I'm not gonna be able to really talk while we do it, but turn this on, I'm just gonna watch that fluid level drop, and I'm just gonna replace it with new fluid until we've got enough gone through that we got all that old fluid out. All right, so that's our first little go around. So what we want to do here is I'm just going to operate the pedal and just make sure we still have good lead here. So there. All right, and then just for the sake of it, I always like to do a couple manual bleeds, even when we've used the vacuum bleeder. It's just nice to make sure you're 100% good. You don't see any air bubbles coming out or anything like that. So I'm gonna put this on here. All right, so we're gonna press our pedal down, open the valve, close it. Get our pressure back up. Do it again. And we are golden. We got nice clean fluid coming through here. No air bubbles, no nothing. So we are good to go. Just make sure that bolt is snug. Nice. Just gonna wipe that cap off. Put our little rubber cap back on here. And we are golden. Nice clean fluid and nice firm pedal. So now we're all set. I'm gonna put the bags back on, we'll take it down, we'll get one more look at it, and we'll take it for a ride. All right, well, we got our brakes bedded in, new pads. As you can see, the new rotor's up in the front here now. But a little more work to do on a test ride when you got new rotors, but we got it all dialed in. Everything feels great. Tires are great, brakes are great. So about to call our customer, tell them to come get this bike. So hopefully you all enjoyed this video. It's obviously a little different than what we normally do, a little bit of maintenance stuff, a couple little extra things in there, but if you like this sort of thing, drop a note in the comments, let us know. We can do more like this, so we can get back to the other, new product stuff we do. Really anything's possible. So I guess we'll hope to hear from you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.